next act has been described as a genius, ladies and gentlemen. That's right, a genius. Now, I sincerely hope that he isn't a genius, right? Because if he is a genius, he should be working on curing cancer or putting the atom back together, not wasting everyone's time telling jokes. You know, the last thing we want to watch is Albert Einstein doing stand-up. So, please welcome a man who's definitely not a genius, the genius that is Stewart Lee!
Thanks very much. Now, this is like a best of the Edinburgh Fringe show, and the Edinburgh Fringe is in August, but you have to decide on the title of your show in March to get it in the programme. And originally, I was going to call my Edinburgh show March of the Mallards, because I'd seen that American film, March of the Penguins, which the American religious right loved, because in it, penguins live essentially ethical lives. They pair off for life, they nurture their young, they're good, and the American born-again Christians said that this film showed us, March of the Penguins, that nature was essentially moral. And I thought about that, and I started to study mallards. And the mallard is the only animal which reproduces exclusively by gang rape. And it's also the only bird to have ever been filmed by scientists indulging in homosexual necrophilia. So I thought you could do a show about mallards called March of the Mallards, which would show us that nature essentially wanted us to be evil. Perhaps have it voiced in a sentimental way by Morgan Freeman. There's those mallards. Fucking their dead friends in the air. In a dance as old as time itself. But then I realised the only funny things about mallards were what I've just said there. I don't know what to call it. And then as luck would have it, in the middle of March, just before the deadline for the programme, I suddenly appeared in one of those Channel 4 programmes, you know, where there's like a list of 100 things. There's a list of 100 things, and it goes on about 6 hours, and each thing is interrupted by a memory from Stuart McConey, who amazingly has memories of all things. Things from the past, from the present, things from the future. He's like a giant baby in space that has observed all human history. And while he's fully conversant with our destiny, he is, by the laws of his race, tragically forbidden from intervening. And I appeared in this programme because I inexplicably came out in a list of the 100 greatest comedians of all time as number 41, and no one was more surprised than my mother, who is basically embarrassed and ashamed by what I do. She, me being 41 in a list of comedians, for her that's a bit like if I'd appeared in a list of the 100 tallest dwarves. Taller than many other dwarves, admittedly, but still essentially a dwarf. And as such, unable to apply for any job with a minimum height requirement, such as basketball player, policeman, or owner-operator of an enchanted beanstalk. The problem with my mother when it comes to stand-up comedy is she's already seen the funniest comedian she's ever going to see. She always goes on about him. And it wasn't me, it was Tom O'Connor, the host of the 1980s quiz game Name That Tune. And my mother saw Tom O'Connor doing stand-up on a cruise which she took 10 years ago when she retired, and that had always been a dream of hers, to go on a cruise, not to see Tom O'Connor doing stand-up on a cruise. Seeing Tom O'Connor do stand-up on a cruise is not even a dream of Tom O'Connor's. In fact, it's his worst nightmare, and one which he has now been trapped in for 10 years. Like some kind of laughing scouse groundhog. fact, Tom O'Connor's been doing stand-up on cruises for so long now that he has developed scurvy. But it was the funniest thing she's ever seen. She said, he was amazing, Stu, Tom O'Connor, she says. He came out, Tom O'Connor, and he said to a man in the audience, he said to him, what do you do for a living? And the man said, I work for Shell or something in finance. And Tom O'Connor said, are you a sardine? Now, that's not it, Stu. That's wrong. What happened was, he came out, Tom O'Connor, and he said to a man in the audience, what do you do for a living? And the man said, I'm in oil. And Tom O'Connor said, are you a sardine? It was hilarious, Stu. He came out, and he said to a man in the audience, what do you do for a living? And the man said, I'm in oil. And Tom O'Connor, he was fast, Stu, like lightning out of a gun. He said to him, are you a sardine? He wasn't a sardine, he was a man. But he said to him, are you a sardine? To make it funny. Because otherwise, if he'd said to him, you're a man, it would have just been an observation of fact. He wasn't. If he had been a sardine, it would have been amazing. But he came out, Stu. It was hilarious. And he said to him, what do you do for a living? And the man said, I'm in oil. And he said, are you a sardine? It was brilliant. It doesn't strictly make... What he meant was because the sardines, Stu, when they're tinned, they're served in... They come in oil, in the tin. So he said, are you a sardine? He could have... If the man had said, I'm in mustard sauce, you know, like if he'd worked for Coleman's or something, he could still have said, are you a sardine? But people wouldn't automatically have connected it with the tin storage for sardines. There would have been a pause, people looking around, then they'd have got it and laughed, but not as hard. It was amazing, Stu. He came out and he said to him, what do you do for a living? And the man said, I'm in oil. And he said, are you a sardine? It was quick, Stu, quick. But it doesn't matter, because the sardines, they're in that... It's not their job, being in oil. That's just how they're tinned for storage when they're dead. So it would only have made sense if he'd said to him, how will you be stored when you're dead? And he was a sardine, and he'd said in oil, and he could have said, are you a sardine? It's like if you said to a man, what do you do for a living? And the man replied, I'm in a coffin. That wouldn't make... It's not strictly speaking true, but all the same, it was hilarious, Stu. He came out, and he said, he was fast, he was quick, off the... He was like a bullet out of a hole. He said to him, what do you do for a living? And the man said, I'm in oil. And he said, are you a sardine? It was amazing. It was better than you. It was amazing. He said, what do you do for a living? And the man said, I'm in oil. And he said, are you a sardine? He wasn't a sardine, he was a man. But he said he was a sardine. Are you a sardine? It was amazing. Are you a sardine? He came out, Stu. Said to the man, what do you do for a living? And the man said, I'm in oil. Tom O'Connor, from Name That Tune, he said, are you a sardine? It was hilarious. Of course, what my mother doesn't realise is that since a nervous breakdown Tom O'Connor suffered in the late 80s after being outed by the tabloids for having an affair with a teenage prostitute, he has answered every question put to him with the phrase, are you a sardine? And like a stopped clock, which is right twice a day, inevitably, at some point in his life, Tom O'Connor is going to be right to give that answer. The first time that happened was when he was on the cruise. And the man said, I'm in oil. And Tom O'Connor said, are you a sardine? And the second was when the O'Connors, Tom O'Connor and Mrs. Tom O'Connor, had gone on holiday after the scandal to try and patch up their marriage. And they went to Portugal, to Lisbon, in June. And a small, oily fish came up to Tom O'Connor in the street. And it declared to him, I am the traditional street festival snack of choice in Lisbon every year on the Festival of St. Anthony, June the 13th. But I'm also a popular summer snack throughout Portugal generally. Tom O'Connor said, "Are you a sardine?" But I do feel I've been slightly unfair on Tom O'Connor. I was asking around, you know, and the comedian Johnny Vegas told me that Tom O'Connor used to be brilliant, and that in the 70s, he could have been the new Billy Connolly. He said he was fantastic. He had all these amazing routines about growing up and his family and his parents and family funerals and weddings and birthday parties and being a little kid and whatever. And apparently this always used to go down brilliantly. Although, remember, that was in Liverpool, where mawkish, cloying sentimentality passes for entertainment. Stewart Lee, thanks a lot for being with us. Cheers. Good night.
Fantastic. Stewart Lee! Stewart Lee! Well, that's all from us at Edinburgh Beyond. Put your hands together once more for all the acts you've seen tonight.